Welcome to This is Getting Old, Moving Towards an Age-Friendly World. I'm your host, Melissa Batchelor, and today I'm joined by Jennifer Kanarek, and we're going to be talking about transportation options for older adults, and in particular, a program called NB Rides. So welcome, Jennifer.
Thanks,
And
good to be here.
so before we begin, maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in helping older adults get around town.
Well, thanks for having me. And so I actually have a background in nonprofit management and marketing communications, fundraising development, and outreach. I became interested in working with older adults when I was doing a marketing job at a large community center in New York City. I marketed the senior programming and the support services for the center, as well as adult lifelong learning. And I found myself at a crossroads at a point, and I decided to get my master's degree in social work, which focuses on community practice and leadership, so more of a macro practice type of work, which focused really on seniors and aging and services for seniors. And so during my graduate time, I worked at the Catholic Charities of East Tennessee, which had stood up one of 9 programs in the country that focused on transitional housing, specifically for the 55 and over population, as well as I was a volunteer coordinator for the Senior Companion Program, which is a federally funded part of the National Corporation for Service. And it's basically a program that pairs lower income seniors with other lower income seniors who are less mobile, who cannot get out of the house. And so the Senior Companion Program offers companionship through these volunteers who also receive a stipend for their time because they are also low income. So the extra money that they receive from volunteering helps to pay for groceries or medications. And so it was a sort of a mutually, a win-win situation for the clients and the volunteers. And so that's where I sort of got my background with, seniors and working within these sort of human services delivery programs for them.
Okay, so housing and transportation are both part of being an age-friendly city and community. So it sounds like you have a great background in doing age-friendly work. So prior to us kind of getting together, I thought about public transportation before, but really, what I've come to learn is that we have, what some of the pros and cons are for the things that we already have in place. So with public transportation, it's a particular route, it may not be going where you need to go. If you're an older, frail adult, you may have to wait outside, in 30-degree weather or 85-degree weather. And so that may not be a good option for you. And even the paratransit programs, which is part of the American Disabilities Act, even that you have to meet eligibility requirements. The vehicles may or may not be outfitted for accessibility. And then, we have kind of this demand response option where it's basically like a shared ride, which again, if you're an older, frail adult, you have to ride with 2 other people who aren't going to the same destination. It can be a very long day. And then you think about kind of the taxi, Uber, Lyft scenario. Older adults can be challenged with that because it's an app which requires technology, internet, and and there's a cost associated with that. So there are a lot of barriers to kind of the things that we typically think about for older adults, and even like non-emergency medical transportation. Again, you have to qualify for that. And so the volunteer program, which NB Rides is one, if you'll just, now you can kind of tell us how that fills in the gap for a lot of the issues that we just talked about. And so just tell us about NB Rides.
Right. No, I mean, you pretty much summed it up, Melissa. That really is why volunteer transportation is something that NB Rides is charged, is to really raise the profile of, because it is, it oftentimes for older, frail adults, it is really the best option, because not only are the volunteers coming to they're not taxi drivers. They're coming to help you get to your appointment. They're coming to help you shop for groceries. So it's really a companionship piece. I mean, we say, our sort of tag right now is it's more than just a ride, because, like you said, Uber and Lyft, there are many seniors who can operate a smartphone and they know how to get an Uber or Lyft, but, there's a level of comfort that some seniors might not feel, having a stranger pick them up. Whereas if they have a volunteer and their job is to help them out of the car, help them into the car, walk them into the appointment, if that's what they want to do, a taxi or an Uber is not going to do that.
Right. And I like actually how that's described. It's either like the door to door option,
yes,
or the door through door.
Correct.
So it's a little bit more of a soft touch.
And it can be right. And that's why NB Rides is so unique, because of the tools that we offer our partners, which is a toolkit of either basically for community-based organizations that want to start a volunteer driver program, or for a community-based organization that already has one established. We can offer an array of services to help them run their programs more efficiently. And we do that through leveraging technology. And so, the technology piece of it, this internet-based ride scheduling software that volunteers have access to, and they can choose the people that they are driving. They can see some cursory notes about the person to see if that's something they feel comfortable with, if it's somebody who has mild cognitive decline and somebody doesn't really know much about that, and there's a note on the ride, then the volunteer, doesn't have to accept that. And oftentimes volunteers and clients do become friends, they become companions, and they become and the volunteer becomes advocates, an advocate for the senior, and just a friend and somebody to talk to. And when we talk about all of these modes of transportation, it doesn't really address the social isolation piece. And
Right.
That's where volunteer transportation for seniors is really a very, very, it's real harm prevention for, long-term chronic diseases. And as you know, as a nurse who works with older adults, right, like isolation and depression and everything that comes with that does, have indicators for long-term health problems and advanced aging, accelerated aging, if you will. So that's where the volunteer piece really comes into play. And, we hear from a lot of the people that our providers help that, that they're like family, they're volunteer drivers like their family. And that's where, that's what sort of gets, me up in the morning and my colleague up in the morning to kind of, expand this program, because there are seniors who are falling through the cracks. And the pandemic, we're sort of anticipating that the pandemic is going to escalate the problem a little bit, because, many of our drivers during the pandemic, some chose to drive, but then some, chose to not. And we're anticipating a lot of them not coming back after the pandemic, because, they've had a big break and they're aging themselves and maybe don't feel comfortable anymore on the road. And so that's where right now we're doing a really big push to educate younger adults in their, in the 40s and 50s, because our average volunteer driver is about 67 years old. We'd like to sort of get a new crop in, because many of these volunteer driver programs that we work with have been operating for almost 20 years. And so there are drivers who've been driving maybe since they were, first retired. And, so we're trying to really communicate that this is a really meaningful volunteer experience, and a use, as from a user experience, and looking for something in a convenient way and a really low barrier way to give back. So
I have a question. Is there a minimum age for your drivers? I would assume 18.
Right. So our partners are autonomous. We are a network for volunteer transportation, which means that we're really a support hub for all of these providers. So they really make their own policy and procedures around the types of drivers. So it really ranges. We have one partner who their minimum age is 25, because that's when you can rent a car. And then we have some shepherd centers who have high school, National Honor Society
Right.
kids who really want to have that intergenerational connection.
Right. I mean, that's what I was thinking, like high school kids that need volunteer hours, or at least, college age students, because one of the best ways to get people interested in caring for older adults and doing this kind of work is for them to have a positive experience. And I think that this volunteer drive program does that.
Yeah.
So, and this is not just like a local program. You're over the whole Washington region, or Washington metropolitan region. So talk to us about how this is funded and kind of the area that you cover.
Right. So the program NV Rides is actually, we are in partnership with the Jewish Council for the Aging in Montgomery County, who runs a similar program called Village Rides, which connects all of the Washington, D.C. and Montgomery County and some Prince George's County villages, who also benefit from the software that we offer and the background, and also we do background pay for all the volunteer driver background checks. So all volunteers are vetted through the NV Rides, standards. So that means that when we have a coordinated hub, a network for volunteer transportation, partners can help each other out. So if rides can't be filled in one community, potentially a partner can call in another community to help, and they know that the NV Rides standard of background check has been performed and that they are vetted. So that's that. So there's Village Rides, and we cover the NV Rides covers the whole Northern Virginia region. And so when we first were stood up in 2014, we were started with some seed funding from Fairfax County, because this idea originated with the Board of Supervisors, who were looking at making Fairfax County more age friendly. And of course, like we spoke about earlier, transportation and housing were the two, biggest emerging needs for seniors. And NV Rides was an initiative that was born out of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors 50+ community action plan to make Fairfax a more livable community. But because now we are funded through, and that was 7 years ago, and now for the last 3 years and going forward, in the next couple of years, we are funded through the Washington Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, which is the Federal Transit Administration's 5310 Enhanced Mobility Grant, which is focused on seniors and adults with disabilities. And so now we are able to operate through, we're in Loudoun County, we have partners in Prince William County, which is growing because the need there is really growing. Arlington County, and then, Fairfax County. So we are all over Northern Virginia. We're Northern Virginia Rides, not just Fairfax County Rides, but the bulk of our programs are there because before NV Rides was started, there were existing volunteer driver programs in Fairfax County. However, they were working in silos and not many were familiar with each other's programs. And so what NV Rides did was networked all of these programs together so that they can come together, share best practices, support one another, offer mentorship. And that's where this program, the model for this program is really very innovative in that it really brings together a collaboration of partners from nonprofits, local government, federal government, and it really brings the whole sort of picture together of how we can strengthen these programs and really replicate it in communities around the country and scale it up. So that's where it's a really innovative solution to an emerging need.
Okay, so if you're in V-Rise and you're doing mostly Northern Virginia, but you're serving in Maryland, DC, also, like, so
our partners, yeah.
Okay, so and on your website is where people could find a list of your partner organizations.
Yes, and so the way it works is for the user, either a volunteer or a client, if you come to our website, you'll have areas to navigate to if you want to become a driver. And it entails everything that, volunteer driving. And, that's where it lists that. And then there's also for clients. And so we are also a referral line as well. I mean, I sort of function as a mobility manager in the role, as well as managing the program. And so I will, if there are people calling from areas where we don't have providers, I will try to match them with another appropriate mode of transportation, with either through our partnership with Fairfax County, who runs human services transportation. And that is where we have a contract with the county. And so we're able to partner with them on trying to do some, free or low cost taxis, also some assistance during the pandemic through Fast Tran, which is the local paratransit. And the local paratransit provider during the pandemic, they were helping us because when volunteers were not able to drive and there were clients who had critical medical care appointments to get to, they helped fill gaps there. So I'm able to kind of get creative and figure out what the best options are for the person looking, and also for, oftentimes we get caregivers or, adult children living in different areas of the country who are trying to coordinate their parents' care from afar, and then they come through to our website and I help them try to navigate what would be the most appropriate program for their parent. And so you can navigate and you can see all of our partners there. We're a consortium of shepherd centers, villages, local community centers, faith communities. And so any community-based organization that thinks that would be a benefit to their constituency, we're here to help develop the program with the CBO, and stand up a program for them. And everything that we offer is free of charge for all of our partners. So, our clients are really our providers that we help support so that they can support their clients more efficiently and more effectively and deliver more services.
Okay, so it sounds like you can either, if you wanted to be a volunteer driver, that you can either go through one of your community partners, or you can actually apply directly on your website, which is nbrides.org. Just so that
you could just send an email to info@nbrides.org, and we'll walk you through the process and explain all of the steps.
Okay, and so we'd mentioned at the beginning some of the public transportation options, or like that there are eligibility criteria. So what is the eligibility that's required to be a rider?
Right. So our partners do vary. Some are 50 and over, and some are 55 and over. But really, it's age and the ability and being a non-driver, somebody who does not have any access to safe and reliable transportation, who needs to get to doctor's appointments, the grocery store, the hairdresser, just activities of daily living, so that seniors who are isolated could be part of their community. And that's where the volunteer driver piece, really is kind of a holistic approach to helping, seniors age in place with dignity. There is no eligibility criteria, there's no means testing. And the only thing that we do require for clients is that they do have to be ambulatory. Our volunteer drivers cannot accommodate wheelchairs. Oftentimes they're older themselves and they're very heavy and, can be a liability. But walkers are okay. Volunteer drivers will offer gentle assistance. Obviously, during the pandemic, we had to change our protocols a little bit with distancing. But for a frailer senior who needs some gentle assistance into the car, the volunteer driver will help with that. If they would like to be walked into the appointment, if they want them to stay. So all of this sort of gets populated in our internet based database, so that volunteers are feeling comfortable with what their assignment is and there's no surprises.
Right. Well, and also they get to choose their assignment. So it's not like you volunteer and then you're told that you need to do this. Correct. You can go in and look to see, as a driver, look to see what's needed, who needs to go where, and then either decide you would like to do, you can choose. So there's like a matching that goes
That's
in.
Right. That's right. So oftentimes I describe NB Rides as a sort of human resources, like a headhunter for volunteer drivers that we then sort of, send out, depending on where they live in the community. So that's very localized. And, volunteer drivers are not driving, 15 miles one way and 50 miles back. It could just be somebody in your neighborhood. If you're working from home, which many of us are, and we anticipate will continue to do, at least in a hybrid model, if you've got a break in your day and you want to do something good for your neighbor, you can hop onto the system or just read your email and see which rides are available and say, okay, I have an hour to take, or I'm going to Trader Joe's. I can take Mrs. Smith to Trader Joe's with me while I do my shopping. So there's so many ways to do it. And we have power drivers who drive 5 days a week. We have drivers who drive once a month. But they're going to be continuing to get updates from the coordinators saying, this is what we did this week. This is what we need for next week. Can somebody please accept a ride? So that's it. And it's more than just a ride.
Right, which I love. And so, if someone doesn't live in the DC metropolitan area, we talked a little bit about, at being a national program or being replicable. How would someone learn more about how to replicate this in their area?
Yes. So there is an organization called NADTC, which is the National Area Transportation Disability Group, that does have a lot of resources on their website for volunteer transportation and different models of volunteer transportation. And yes, there are volunteer transportation programs all over the country. Shepherd Center, which is one of our partners, and we are very Shepherd Center rich in Northern Virginia because there are 6 operating Shepherd Centers here all throughout the region. And Shepherd Centers are national, so local communities do have these programs. However, this model for a network and a hub and spoke sort of approach is really not as caught up around the rest of the country. I know of a program in Canada that functions similarly, but I'm not aware of any in the United States that does do this sort of hub for volunteer transportation. So we believe that it is something that can be modeled in other communities, which you need to get your stakeholders together. You need to get your, who are the community members, and we need to, talk it through and really come together as a community to figure out how to fill gaps and work together and collaborate. And, I was just saying in a meeting the other day that nonprofits really, in order to thrive in this environment that we find ourselves in, it's really all about collaboration. We really need to sort of partner and really, think about these big problems and come up with creative and innovative solutions through partnering together. And I think that's where NV Rides is really very special, because Fairfax County really, has given us the opportunity to become, a brand in the community, because this is something that, where a community center is doing for the entire community to help seniors age in place.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you being with us today and sharing, the NV Rides program. I also want to give a shout out to my buddy, Catherine Reed, who connected me to you. And we're going to link your need to know interview with her on my website, melissabphd.com. But
Great.
If you're interested in learning more and connecting with Jennifer, you can go to nvrides.org, or you can give her a call at 703-537-3071. And I appreciate all of the work you're doing to create age-friendly transportation and fill in some of these gaps for older adults in this area.
Yeah. And also don't forget, you can find us on Facebook and like us, and you'll get some really great news and information related to transportation and older adults and adults with disabilities. And so it's a really good resource for that as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with me today, Jennifer.
Thanks so much, Melissa. Take care.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of This is Getting Old, Moving Towards an Age-Friendly World. You can find more episodes like this on my YouTube channel, Melissa B. PhD, and don't forget to subscribe. You can also visit my website, melissabphd.com, and check out the podcast and blog section, because that's where I put all the hyperlinks and different things that we may talk about in any given episode. You can follow me on social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. And you can also find the audio version of the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and Amazon Music. So I hope this podcast gives you ideas of different things that we can do to move towards an age-friendly world, because when the world is age-friendly, it's friendly for everyone.